These are 9 banned Wild West facts. So bizarre you'll think they're fake, but every single one is documented American frontier history that Hollywood does not want you to know about. The American frontier was not the lawless gunslinging paradise of movies and television. The real Wild West was stranger, more diverse, and infinitely more fascinating than any Hollywood script could imagine. What you are about to discover will completely shatter everything you think you know about cowboys, outlaws, and life on the frontier. Let's start with perhaps the most mind-bending fact of all. The United States Army had an official Camel Corps that roamed the American Southwest for over a decade. Yes, you heard that correctly, camels in Texas. In 1855, Jefferson Davis, who would later become President of the Confederacy, convinced Congress to set aside $30,000 to import camels from the Middle East for military use. The logic seemed solid on paper. Camels could haul more weight than horses, required less water, and thrived in desert conditions that would kill other animals. A single camel could carry 600 pounds across terrain that would destroy a horse. The USS Supply sailed to the Middle East and returned with dozens of camels and their handlers, including a Syrian man named Haji Ali, whose name Americans butchered into Hi-Jolly. Camp Verde, Texas became camel headquarters, and soon 70 camels were stationed there. But here's where it gets weird. The camels actually worked perfectly. They outperformed horses in every way you could measure. Lieutenant Colonel Robert E. Lee himself led a camel caravan on patrol in 1860 and declared their benefits proven beyond doubt. Yet the Army abandoned the program entirely. Why? American soldiers absolutely despised these animals. They complained about their smell, their tendency to bite and spit, and their unsettling gait that made seasoned riders feel like amateurs. Horses panicked at the sight of camels, creating chaos in cavalry units. Most importantly, soldiers felt humiliated being called camel drivers and would deliberately turn their camels loose, hoping they would escape into the desert. When the Civil War erupted, Confederate forces seized the remaining camels at Camp Verde. After the war ended, the Army sold them at auction, and many escaped into the wild. For decades afterward, prospectors and travelers reported encounters with feral camels roaming the Southwest. One legendary beast, called the Red Ghost, supposedly stood 30 feet tall and terrorized Arizona in the 1880s. The last official Army camel, nicknamed Old Topsy, did not die until 1934. Hi-Jolly lived out his life in Arizona and was buried in Quartzsite, where his grave is still marked by a pyramid monument topped with a metal camel silhouette. Now let's talk about something that would literally poison you. Old West whiskey was poisonous. The rot gut served in frontier saloons was not just terrible, it was actively dangerous. Bartenders made their concoctions from raw alcohol mixed with whatever they could find, including burnt sugar for color, chewing tobacco for flavor, and turpentine for bite. One popular recipe, called Old Snakehead, included 1 gallon of alcohol, a pound of black twist tobacco, molasses, red peppers, and 5 gallons of river water. This is not a joke. It called for 2 actual rattlesnake heads per barrel. The recipe instructed bartenders to drop in a horseshoe, and when it floated to the surface, the whiskey was ready to drink. Other colorful names included Tarantula Juice, Coffin Varnish, and Taos Lightning. Some versions contained strychnine, a deadly poison that causes violent muscle contractions within minutes of consumption. It is a miracle anyone survived drinking this stuff, but desperate miners and cowboys gulped it down anyway. The dead man's hand, aces and eights, supposedly held by Wild Bill Hickok when he was shot, was not called that until 50 years after his death. No contemporary source from 1876 mentions what cards Hickok actually held when Jack McCall shot him in the back of the head at Nuttall and Mann's Saloon in Deadwood. The earliest reference to a dead man's hand appeared in 1886, and it described a full house of 3 jacks and a pair of 10s, not aces and eights. The current version did not take hold until a 1926 book spread the myth. For half a century, Wild Bill's alleged final hand was completely made up. Get this, the real gunfight at the OK Corral lasted exactly 30 seconds, and it did not actually happen at the corral. The shootout between the Earps and the Cowboys took place on a public street behind the corral at what is now the intersection of 3rd and Fremont Streets in Tombstone. 9 men fired dozens of shots in half a minute, creating the most famous 30 seconds in Western history. But here's something that challenges everything you think you know about the Wild West. It had stricter gun control than many modern American cities. Dodge City, Deadwood, and Tombstone all required visitors to check their firearms with local law enforcement when entering town. The laws of Tombstone specifically demanded that visitors disarm, either at a hotel or a lawman's office. UCLA law professor Adam Winkler documented that these restrictions were standard across frontier settlements. Many frontier towns banned carrying firearms within city limits entirely. The myth of everyone walking around armed comes from Hollywood, not history. In reality, in the 1880s, you were more likely to be arrested for carrying a gun in Dodge City than in many parts of modern America. Bank robberies, the supposed staple of outlaw life, were shockingly rare. According to historian Larry Schweikart, fewer than 10 confirmed bank robberies occurred between 1859 and 1900 across 15 frontier states. That's less than 1 robbery per decade per state. Your local bank today faces more robbery attempts in a single year than entire frontier states saw in 40 years. The demographics of the Wild West were completely different from Hollywood's version. Following the Civil War, about 25% of cowboys were African American, seeking opportunity and independence in Western territories where they could earn wages and respect for their skills. Legends like Nat Love, known as Deadwood Dick, and Bass Reeves, who inspired the Lone Ranger, dominated the frontier. Another third were Mexican vaqueros, who had been working cattle for generations before Americans arrived. Most cowboys did not wear 10-gallon Stetson hats. The most popular headwear was actually the derby or bowler hat because it was more practical and would not fly off while riding at speed. When you see those Stetson-wearing cowboys in movies, that is Hollywood fiction, not frontier reality. Perhaps the most disturbing fact involves a mummified outlaw who traveled more in death than he ever did alive. Elmer McCurdy was shot and killed after robbing a train in Oklahoma in 1911. An undertaker embalmed him with arsenic, creating an accidental mummy, and displayed the body to curious visitors for a nickel admission fee. In 1916, 2 men posing as McCurdy's brothers convinced the funeral home to release the body. They were actually carnival promoters who added McCurdy to their traveling sideshow as the outlaw who would never be captured alive. For the next 60 years, McCurdy's mummified corpse changed hands repeatedly, appearing in carnival sideshows, haunted houses, and low-budget films. By the 1960s, his body had deteriorated significantly, losing fingers, toes, and ears. He was painted bright red and hung as a prop in a Long Beach funhouse. In December 1976, the production crew of The $6 Million Man was filming in the warehouse when someone noticed that what they thought was a mannequin had actual human hair and teeth. Medical examination revealed a real corpse containing a bullet, ticket stubs, and a 1924 penny that helped identify the remains as Elmer McCurdy. In April 1977, 66 years after his death, McCurdy was finally buried in Oklahoma. 300 people attended the service, and 2 feet of concrete was poured over his casket to prevent any future exploitation. These facts reveal a truth more fascinating than any Hollywood legend. The real Wild West was brief, lasting only 30 years from 1865 to 1890. Historian Frederick Jackson Turner called this the closing of the American frontier in his famous 1893 Frontier Thesis. But it was packed with impossible stories, diverse characters, and bizarre experiments that shaped American history in ways we are still discovering. The frontier was not just cowboys and Indians, it was a melting pot of former slaves, Mexican vaqueros, failed miners, ambitious entrepreneurs, and yes, even camels, all trying to build something new in an untamed land. Reality, as always, proves far stranger than fiction.